to be beyond the stipulated time for the day's activity, breaching curfew regulations. This contravention would attract the police, who upon a tip-off from members of the public swung into action. Kayole Police Boss Wilson Kosgei says the group will spend the next 14 days under mandatory quarantine as part of the war against COVID-19 spread.
When we came to verify that information, it was true. We found 39 women of middle-aged. We are told there was a wedding. At this time, when the government has really come out to say there's no gathering, so there was gathering that started very early in the morning. Most of the women here, most of them are coming from Misili. They came to have a fun and also have a party in Nasra. So we have arrested all of them.
But the 39 women are not the only guests of the state. Another 31 individuals who were arrested within Kayole and Ruai areas over the weekend have been thrown into quarantine at Kenya Medical Training College.
Ukikaidi amri ya serikali, it is an insult to the government. Why should people gather when people are spreading diseases? I'm not saying...
Addressing the apparent disregard of the law and order by a section of Kenyans, the police are promising to stop at nothing to ensure all and sundry follow directives issued as the country copes with COVID-19 pandemic.
And those are drunkards. They were caught kujienjoy, walikuwa nakunywa pombe. Sasa waende 14 days forced quarantine ambaye watalipa wenyewe. So itakuwa an example kwa wale wengine ambaye na hata saizi jioni tumepata watu wengi sana wako police station. So we shall be guided by our commander tomorrow.
Reporting for Channel 1 News, I'm Gladys Mongai.
I remember the government has reiterated that if you're caught flaunting precautionary measures, especially curfew, then you're going to be considered exposed to COVID-19 and you're going to be forced into quarantine at your own cost. So kindly do adhere to the curfew. Now, doctors in Trans Nzoia County are threatening to down their tools if the county administration fails to settle 2-month salary arrears allegedly that owed to them. Now, the medics claim that the county administration has done little to address their grievances in the wake of threats posed by COVID-19 pandemic. Now, their concerns coming as the county grapples with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic that has left 281 people infected in the country.
The country has been on edge ever since the first positive case of COVID-19 was announced, with the government pronouncing a raft of mitigation mechanisms to contain its spread. And with the threat now spreading across most of the country, doctors in Trans Nzoia County are threatening to down their tools, accusing the county administration of allegedly overlooking the welfare of health workers since the launch of a campaign to fight the spread of coronavirus. The doctors now want the county government to pay their salaries within 7 days, failure to which they will down their tools.
Na sisi mpaka saa hizi hatuna mshahara, tunaumia na njaa. Tunahitaji kusikizwa, kaunti yetu haijatupatia nafasi ya kupeana mazungumzo yetu, wasikie shida tunazo za mshahara.
Kama watakuwa wametekeleza haya matakwa, sisi tutaweka tools zetu chini na mtu asitublame. Tumejaribu yetu yote yenye tuyawezavyo, lakini hakuna mtu anatilia ombi letu maanani.
The medics painted a picture of a devastated workforce that has to put up with delayed salaries and a lack of personal protective equipment while waging war against the pandemic.
Sisi tuweze kuwaona nyinyi kama wagonjwa wetu wa Trans Nzoia, lazima pia sisi tuwe na kinga. Otherwise pia sisi tutakuwa madaktari hatari wenye kueneza ugonjwa huu wa corona.
And the leadership of this county, we are putting you to task to ensure that doctors are well protected. Otherwise, when you call us, when you need us, and we refuse to appear, all the blame will be on your hands.
Meanwhile, religious leaders in Nakuru County now want to be involved in distribution of relief food and supplies to ensure that only deserving cases adversely affected by COVID-19 outbreak benefit. The leaders said stringent measures should be put in place to ensure that a few greedy individuals do not take advantage of the exercise to enrich themselves.
Kama wanagawa chakula yoyote ya msaada kwa ajili ya wale watu ambao wako na njaa na shida, ninawaomba tu kwa huruma ya Mwenyezi Mungu washirikiane na wachungaji. Maana wachungaji ndio wanabeba wale watu wana mashida aina mbalimbali.
Elsewhere, the war against COVID-19 disease in Kisumu County received a major boost after a local farm donated 30 beds to boost quarantine bed capacity in the area. The donation by Abyssinia Iron and Steel Company Limited, among other interventions, will bring the county's installed quarantine bed capacity to 398. Speaking after receiving the donation at Lumumba Sub-County Hospital in Kisumu, Governor Anyang' Nyong'o said additional beds shall be installed at the facility, which has the capacity of holding 70 patients.
We have KMTC with 128 bed capacity, and we are in the process of completing a 200-bed center at the county referral facility near the Jomo Kenyatta Sports Ground. We are now going around identifying suitable institutions in the sub-counties that can also be equipped to be used as quarantine centers.
And in Kilifi County, those caught floating directives as set out by the Ministry of Health will be arrested and forced to quarantine at their cost. Kilifi County Governor Amason Kingi is expressing concern on how people casually ignore government directives despite the dangers posed by the deadly disease. Kingi directed all sub-chiefs, village elders and county administrators to ensure directives issued by the national government are adhered to.
Kwa hivyo wako hapo polisi, tutawatoa leo. Tumewaandalia pahali ambao tutawashika pale kwa siku 14. Baada ya hapo tutawapima, alafu ndo waachilie. Iwe lile funzo la watu wengine ambao watatoka.
And mass testing for the coronavirus has kicked off at the port of Mombasa for the employees of the Kenya Ports Authority on Sunday. Acting Managing Director Engineer Rashid Salim and General Manager Operations and Harbour Master Captain William Ruto coordinated the exercise and were among the first 50 KPA staff to undergo the COVID-19 test.
We're taking the measure to ensure that everybody is tested. And all our workers we are testing today, we are starting with the confectional cargo operations. Tomorrow we will do also the security and also container terminal operations. Those are the key areas where we cannot stop operations because the port works 24/7 a day.
Beatrice Gatonyengetich, Channel 1 News.
Now, on matters education, is that the ministry has found itself under fire over claims that learners in the country, all learners in the country that is, are benefiting from online education. Now, according to Mwingi Central MP Gideon Mulyungi, the remarks made by the Education Cabinet Secretary Dr. George Magoha do not reflect the actual state of affairs, especially in rural areas where learners have been left out due to lack of infrastructure to support digital learning.
On Sunday, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha poured cold water into the possibility of a postponement of this year's national examinations. In dismissing these fears, Magoha noted that learning is on course via online platforms.
Up to this moment, nobody has thought of postponing the examinations, the national examinations, both the primary school exams and the secondary school exams. And to the best of the government's ability, the children are getting online learning, as I stated last week.
This stance has not been received well by a section of the populace. Mwingi Central Member of Parliament Gideon Mulyungi, for instance, has said that the remarks made by the Education CS do not reflect the actual situation across the country.
From the perspective of my constituency and the picture in most parts of the country, this is not happening, and it is a total lie. The CS is speaking from the Ivory Tower in Nairobi, and is not in touch with the reality on the ground.
He argues that in the rural areas, for example, online education is impractical due to lack of the necessary infrastructure.
Students in the rural villages and some urban areas cannot afford this imaginary luxury of online teaching during this period of COVID-19 pandemic.
In his opinion, the Ministry of Education ought to conduct a mop-up exercise and work out a strategy of ensuring that all learners are catered for, especially considering that a majority of families are facing hard economic times.
He should come to Kitui, visit some families and see how they are doing it in the villages where people don't even have houses. Just visit them there, where people stay in manned houses, some don't even have a shelter, and see the situation on the ground.
The concern comes even as the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers supported the government rollout of virtual learning. Indeed, KUPPET Kisii chapter argues that all education stakeholders ought to adhere to the help curb coronavirus spread. The union has, however, criticized the decision to utilize learning institutions as coronavirus isolation centers, warning that this move may have psychological impacts on learners when schools reopen.
When our students go back to school, they might be affected psychologically, having learned that their schools, their items were used by corona patients.
That indeed is a question there, especially those who are off-grid, that Kenyans continue asking. While at the same time, Education Cabinet Secretary there, Dr. George Magoha, insisting that Kenyans need to listen to only one voice, and that is his as the Education Cabinet Secretary. Now, the Machakos Stadium has been transformed into a health facility that will serve as a temporary mass screening and treatment area for COVID-19. Now, patients in the county administration, as the county administration now moves to enhance its capacity. Now, Machakos Governor, Dr. Alfred Mutua, says the move seeks to free up the Machakos Level 5 Hospital from being a treatment and isolation center for coronavirus as part of efforts aimed at curbing its spread among patients. Now, meanwhile, Mombasa Governor Hassan Joho has also launched a distribution of relief supplies to thousands of vulnerable populations living in the region's urban center.
Mombasa Governor Ali Hassan Joho has emerged as one of the most proactive county bosses, launching a series of initiatives aimed at containing the spread of COVID-19 in one of the counties regarded as a hotspot in the country. On Monday, Joho would launch the distribution of relief food targeting about 50,000 urban poor households in the county, this being the first phase of an exercise that seeks to cushion them from the hard economic times.
If we are wise enough to understand and to be able to deal or basically adhere to the regulations that have been given, my friend, we can be able to deal with COVID-19 within the shortest time possible.
The governor urging area residents to observe guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health as part of efforts aimed at flattening the infection curve. Mombasa County Commissioner Gilbert Kichiyo warning that the government will take stern measures to all those who defy government directives.
Kwa hivyo hiyo enforcement itaongezwa. Sababu tunataka watu wakae nyumbani. Tunataka watu wafae mask. Watu obey mambo ya social distance. Hiyo ndio njia tu ambayo labda mwananchi mwingine atapata kuielewa.
In Machakos County, the Machakos Stadium has been converted into a health facility. Area Governor Alfred Mutua says the facility can hold up to 1,000 isolation beds with 200 set aside for critical COVID-19 patients.
I decided, and my government decided, we had cabinet, that we have money to compensate our health workers. Because our askari ndio wako frontline, ndio wanapigwa bunduki. Ile risasi ya kwanza ya hii virus inakutana na hao health workers. Lazima tuwapatie bulletproof hizo nguo na bulletproof pia ya pesa ya kuweza kwa motivate wafanye kazi.
Mutua says Machakos Level 5 Hospital is well equipped for COVID-19 mass testing and is only awaiting a go-ahead from KEMRI. The county now has 228 persons in quarantine, with a further 1,056 having had completed the quarantine and turned out negative.
Wacheni kutuenjoy hii tamaa yenyu tuwamaliza ilimaliza fisi. Huu ni wakati wa kujali wale vijana ambao biashara imefungwa watakula nini? Wale watu wamefutwa kazi watakula nini? They should be thinking about how to set up a cushioning, a benefit of economics to help our people.
Yusuf Farah, Channel 1 News.
Indeed, there are 2 counties that are already setting the pace in the fight against coronavirus. Now, healthcare practitioners are pushing for the release of results for COVID-19 tests undertaken on their colleagues in a bid to reduce anxiety among the frontline workers. Now, the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentist Union says a move is necessary given that the number of them are in a state of fear due to risk of exposure arising from inadequate personal protective equipment.
Delaying the release of the results for COVID-19 tests done on healthcare workers has attracted the attention of Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentist Union. The union is urging the state to disclose the health status of personnel who stand at the front line in the fight against coronavirus.
Healthcare workers who were tested last week and they are yet to receive their results. It is a good initiative, but let's also, for the sake of the healthcare workers' mental health and assurance, provide these results within the 48-hour timeline.
According to the union acting Secretary General Chibanzi Mochoda, failure to have the results on time has left a number of key sectors players nervous and unable to execute their mandate.
It's information that will make people see and Kenyans see that they also need to protect their healthcare workers, because healthcare workers are not immune to this disease. Where it is not safe, then they shall follow the law, they shall take a step back, raise that issue with the immediate authorities in that facility, and shall only be able to continue once those issues are raised.
The union also wants provision of adequate protective gears to healthcare personnel to alleviate fears of possible infections.
Healthcare workers in isolation centers instead of having them in the areas where they're supposed to work in. It will be disastrous if a Kenyan has to go to the hospital and find no healthcare workers.
At the same time, the union is urging county governments not to intimidate health workers over protracted labor disputes, as this is counterproductive in the war against COVID-19.
Who are deployed and currently working in the National Teaching and Referral Hospitals. We have received information on threats to stoppage of salaries for these doctors. We take a strong stand against such actions.
They also want recruitment of extra healthcare workers hastened to boost the country's effort towards fighting coronavirus that has seen 14 people lose their lives to the pandemic. Reporting for Channel 1 News, I'm Gladys Mungai.
Now, local textile and garments manufacturing companies have moved to take advantage of the current demand for locally manufactured protective gear in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak in the country. Now, the demand has seen local companies such as Thika Cloth Mills Limited take a lead in production of gear, including donating some of the products to the vulnerable communities in society.
As the government continues to grapple with the effects of coronavirus that have resulted in job losses and a slowdown of the economy, with associated effects hitting hard on Kenyans, with those living in urban centers struggling to provide basic necessities as well as protective gear such as masks for their families. And with the government making it mandatory for Kenyans to wear masks in public places in a bid to curb the spread of COVID-19 disease, an initiative by local manufacturing companies that seeks to cushion families living in informal settlements from lacking protective gear has been launched.
There are about 2 million people in the slums in Nairobi and 8 million people outside Nairobi in the slums. So we're trying to help as much as we can.
2 masks in each box, so each family will get 2 masks. The masks need to be washed thoroughly with hot water and soap, and then they can use them.
The initiative, spearheaded by Thika Cloth Mill Limited, saw residents of Kibera and the Ministry of Interior and Coordination receive over 20,000 masks so as to aid in the fight against coronavirus.
So if you look at the masks we've donated here today, the 10,000 masks, they're all different. Some have string, and they're made of different qualities, made of different cottons, and they're all really good and they're all really nice because all the garment factories know what kind of specs to follow, and they've been told which is the best way to make the mask, and all the garment factories have made the mask.
These even as they called on Kenyans to promote the local textile industries and garments manufacturers, as they are now able to manufacture protective gear so as to join in the production of face masks.
This has an opportunity of, this is something we can do. We can make masks, we can make cotton masks. It will benefit the cotton farmer, it benefits the textile factory.
These masks made in Kenya, because this is helping create some employment here, especially at this very critical time. However, I pray and hope that even after the coronavirus, may the government continue that momentum of buying products made in Kenya. That way, we'll be able to uplift the quality of life of the average Kenyan citizen.
Hili janga la COVID-19 limetufunza kama Wakenya kwamba tuko na uwezo wa kufanya kazi sisi wenyewe locally.
The business owners urging the political class to join hands and support vulnerable members of the society. Reporting for Channel 1 News, I'm Jackie Wambiru.
Buy Kenya, build Kenya. Now crossing over to Marty's business is that the government has secured a 1.5 billion shillings spar production of a specialty coffee in 8 counties responsible for 70% of the country's total production under coffee revitalization project. Now, Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya says a World Bank grant will be used to, among others, market a specialty coffee by linking farmers directly to buyers, thereby eliminating middlemen.
In an effort to boost coffee activities, Kenya embarked on a coffee revitalization action plan, which recommended interventions based on 8 pillars to address the challenge of the sector. This saw the government engage in various partners in a bid to revive the sector.
The president himself is the one who started these coffee reforms by appointing a task force that went around picking views and making recommendations. So actually what we are implementing now is the recommendations that emanated from that task force and the roadmap that was developed, which gave recommendation on certain components of reforms that required to undertake.
Speaking during the launch of the first phase of the coffee revitalization project, targeting coffee growing areas via video conferencing with governors from the coffee growing counties, Agriculture CS Peter Munya said the fund will ensure increased coffee production, which has been dwindling over the years, by prioritizing specialty coffee in Murang'a, Kiambu, Meru, Tharaka Nithi, Machakos, Kirinyaga and Nyeri counties.
Because of the resources, we thought if we spread it across the country, we won't have the impact we wanted to have. And we said we start with the main coffee growing areas that consist of these 6 counties that grow 70% of the coffee in the country. And that will be phase 1. And then phase 2 is the rest of the counties that are not included here. So we have very specific interventions that will be undertaken to make sure that the production goes up and even the quality of coffee also increases. Of course, this will involve extension services, subsidy support, research, quality seeds, etc., etc. All measures that are geared towards increasing productivity and also increasing the volumes of coffee.
The fund will also be used to enhance efficiency along the coffee value chain and strengthen cooperatives.
Cooperatives have closed down, and we have had some interventions, especially on matters production, where we have spent about 50 million in provision of line.
Of course, it's improving the efficiency of the farmer cooperative societies. So we'll also be looking at the cooperative societies. How are they organized? What challenges do they have? How do we address the governance challenges that are there that have been making it difficult for the cooperatives to run? We'll also be looking even at the viability of some of those cooperatives.
Currently, Kenya produces 40,000 tons of coffee, which the CS says could be scaled to at least 100,000 tons by 4th quarter of the year. The World Bank will similarly support refurbishment of cooperatives to ensure automation.
The once a very lucrative cash crop, coffee, has been declining in production for many years now. But according to the Ministry of Agriculture, the new revitalization of coffee program is set to address challenges that include supply, production, and marketing. Alana Oko reporting for Channel 1 News in Nairobi.
Now, still keeping up on matters business is that the Capital Markets Authority has cautioned investors against participating in unlicensed and unapproved entities. This follows numerous inquiries regarding the status of the Saiton High-Yielding Fund, which, according to CMA, is among 6 unregulated funds operated by the firm. Complaints have ensued over the decision by Saiton's Board of Investors to push the redemption of yields by 90 days, causing jitters among investors.
The decision by the board of the Saiton High Yielding Fund has caused jitters among the 3,000 investors in the 10 billion shillings fund. According to Shiva Arora, head of private equity at Saiton, the decision to freeze payment of the yields was reached by the board of investors, which manages the fund, towards the end of last month. The board is made up of investors in the high-yielding fund and the Saiton project note. As of January this year, the two products were offering investors an annualized return of 13.7% to investors. Saiton says the decision was arrived last month by the board that manages the fund due to the slowdown in the real estate sector caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The two funds target investors with a minimum of 1 million shillings. A dispatch from the Capital Markets Authority says the only licensed entity is Saiton Asset Management Limited, which is licensed as a fund manager and a real estate investment trust manager. CMA further says the high-yielding fund and the Saiton project notes are not regulated by the authority, urging the public to consult Saiton for queries touching on the two products. Saiton High Yield Solutions is for short-term investors, while Saiton project notes is tailored for medium to long-term investments. The regulated products are not affected by the suspension of yields redemption.
Crossing over to matters of sports, where former Football Kenya Federation Chair Sam Nyamwaya says he will extend the term of office at the Kenya Premier League if he wins the forthcoming FKF elections. Gor Mahia Secretary General Omondi Aduda and former AFC Leopards Chairman Alex Ole Magello are among other aspirants who have already declared their intentions of toppling the current, or rather incumbent chair, Nick Mwendwa. Now, Nyamwaya, who yesterday officially confirmed that he will be contesting during the exercise, which will likely be held after the coronavirus is contained, has now stated that he will extend the KPL's term for stability and continuity, contrary to Mwendwa's intentions of doing away with it when the term of office expires in May. Nyamwaya further says he will work closely with coaches and referees to improve the sports in the country, and also concentration of the top seat at FKF is a former Federation Vice Chairman Twaham Barak, ex-Vihiga Governor Moses Akeranga, and Nairobi businessman Steve Mboro. Now that brings us up to the matters as far as GMK News Briefs is concerned, but we're still keeping you informed on what has been happening, or rather what has made headlines in the last 24 hours. And now we usher in the headlines, and to take us through this first session is none other than my colleague Doreen Arangi on the other side of the studio. Over to you, Doreen.
Exactly. We'll begin with our In the Headlines segment. But before we get to do that, let's just look at the numbers, how they've been rising, especially here in the African continent. But let's first begin with Kenya. As of yesterday, 11 more cases were reported in the country or confirmed of people infected with this disease, bringing the total number of confirmed cases in the country to 281, 14 deaths and 69 recoveries. Remember, 4 counties, restriction of movement has been announced at least in 4 counties, 4 major counties so far, which had been regarded as hotspots. That is here in the country, in Kenya. But coming to Africa, South Africa is still the leading country with the number of confirmed cases, with over 3,000 cases, followed by Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Ghana, Cameroon, and Tunisia, Ivory Coast. So this is just some of the countries that have really been greatly hit by this virus, with recording above 1,000 cases, with having at least 1,000 plus confirmed cases. These are like 6 African countries so far that have recorded over 1,000 cases of this disease. And also, as of yesterday, Tanzania recorded 84 cases in just a span of 24 hours. Also just showing that a country in East Africa that has the number of people infected with this disease is also just highly increasing in that specific country. Also, there are countries in Africa that have announced lockdowns. Of course, this include countries like Ghana, Nigeria, which had announced lockdowns just to contain this disease, given the fact that it was widely spreading. Of course, also countries like Uganda, Rwanda, just some of the countries in the African continent that had announced this lockdown. And this brings the number of confirmed cases in the African continent to about over 23,000 confirmed cases in the African continent. Of course, there has been a number of recoveries on this African countries. There has also been a number of death cases. But that's just where we stand in terms of cases here in Kenya, as well as the entire African continent. But we still hope for the best and that this disease will become a thing of the past. So now we move to our In the Headlines segment, and as usual, we begin with the People's Daily. And on the front page of this paper, the header here is Corona now hits villages. Of course, just showing you that it is no longer in the counties, but it has also moved to the rural setups. And the health CS Kagwe blames reckless behavior, especially by the middle class, for spread of deadly virus from Nairobi to capitals, peri-urban and rural areas, as country's infection rise to 281 after 11 new cases were reported yesterday. This story has been fleshed out from page 4 all through page 13. Still on that front page, there's a map just showing how different counties, different villages, especially in these counties, have been affected. There's on the sidebar, the number of confirmed cases has also been well spelled out. 281 cases so far, 69 recoveries, 14 deaths. And of the 11 cases that were confirmed yesterday, it comprised of 5 females and 6 males. Also a sample of 13,872 people have been tested so far. On the bottom end of the front page, you also have the why Mombasa might be the new virus hotspot. Remember, the virus hotspot was here in Nairobi, but this just shows that why Mombasa might be the new virus hotspot. Of course, we'll be seeing the details of that inside the paper. Also, just showing the number of counties, the number of estates in the counties that have been really affected by this disease. There's Nairobi, Machakos, Kajiado, Mombasa, as well as the estates that have been greatly affected, just also been recorded there. Also still on the front page, Marakwet mudslides death toll rises to 12. So the Interior Minister Fred Matiang'i says that 400 families were left homeless and asked residents in flood-prone areas to move to higher grounds as Meteorological Department warns of more rains expected. So let's just see what more is inside this paper in regards to this issue of floods as well as mudslides. And so mudslides death rise to 12 as 8 bodies have been retrieved. And the death toll from the mudslides that occurred at the border of West Pokot and Elgeyo Marakwet County has risen to 12 after 8 more bodies were retrieved in Chesogon. And so the government spokesperson Cyrus Oguna said in a statement that the government had dispatched assorted foodstuffs for distribution to flood victims, adding that 5 police officers and 2 civilians had been airlifted to Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, while 13 people were treated and discharged. So this is just how these rains are affecting some people in different parts of this country. But also just continuing with the rains, the Met boss says that heavy rainfall to last longer than even how we expected. And so the ongoing heavy rainfall will continue pounding most parts of the country, the Met department has projected, and the department warned Kenyans living especially in the mudslide-prone areas to move to safer ground. This was mentioned by the director Stella Aura, who said say that the western, central, Nairobi and coast region will receive rain of more than 30 millimeter in 24 hours. So let me just give you some of these counties in these parts of the country. Of course, he mentioned central, Nairobi, coast as well as western. And some of these counties include Siaya, Kisumu, Homa Bay, Migori, Kisii, Nyamira, Trans Nzoia, Baringo, Uasin Gishu, Elgeyo Marakwet, Nandi, Laikipia, Nakuru, Narok, Kericho, Bomet, Kakamega, Vihiga, Bungoma, and Busia counties. So that means that if you're coming from these counties, you really have to ensure that you take care of yourself, ensure that at least, you know, because it's just from what you're seeing from this article, there's some people that have died because of this rain. So precaution is important. To some other story now, and this is in regards to matters to do with corruption in the country, which is an issue that we still grapple with, I mean, for us here as a country. And this is the daring AP officer recorded demanding bribe at gunpoint. So this abnormal but dangerous incident happened in Mombasa last week. It actually shows the length some police officers will go to just land that note in their pockets. And a career-ending move replete with carelessness and disregard to public safety. An administration police officer was captured on video drowning a gun and demanding a bribe from a boda boda operator. So he was not just demanding the bribe, but he was also threatening to shoot the boda boda rider if they do not give a bribe. So clearly, issues to do with corruption, matters to do with corruption, things that we should be looking at as a country to see how best we can stop that. But now moving to the story that has really been hitting the headlines since the first case was recorded here in the country, and this is matters to do with coronavirus. And so the virus sneaks into the villages beyond Nairobi region. So this just shows that it is beyond the major cities. It has now moved to peri-urban centers, or if you may, the rural areas. And so the coronavirus pandemic has made its way into the densely populated villages beyond the Nairobi metropolis that was sealed off following the failure by Kenyans, especially by the middle class, to observe government guidelines to stop the spread of this disease. And figures and analysis released by the Ministry of Health yesterday painted an ominous picture after it emerged that apart from spreading to villages and modest settlements in Nairobi, Kiambu, Machakos, and Kajiado counties, the virus has also hit rural areas, having been confirmed in Murang'a County. And so the CS mentioned yesterday during his daily briefs that he continuously warned that Kenyans' attitude and stubbornness could cost the country dearly, even as we have recorded 281 cases of this disease. Of course, we'll continue unpacking what more is inside this paper. Jane.
We continue with the Daily Nation. Remember, this is in the headlines. And just to link up with what you're talking about, Doreen, before we get to some of the main stories on the front page of the Daily Nation, when it comes to working together and, you know, just trying to establish where the weak links are and, you know, strengthening those weak links, there is a caricature here that I want us to just have a quick look at to just sort of paint a picture of what we mean when we talk about the weak link. And here the caption says, COVID-19 loves weaklings. And you can clearly see there's some people who are holding hands, but along the line there are some others who continue to move on with life as usual and consequently creating that weakling. And at the bottom left there you can see green round thingy that we presume to be the COVID-19 virus. And that is where it is actually aiming at, you know, that weak link of those who are continuing with life as usual, partying, drinking, and not putting on masks, not observing social distancing. That is how the situation is if we continue with life as usual, because COVID-19 loves those weaklings. So that is just to link up with what you were talking about, Doreen was talking about right there. But going to the front page of the Daily Nation, the main story right there is in regards to the nationals, the Kenyan nationals and other nationals who have been stranded in China, most of whom have been evicted from their houses and hotels on the basis of being dark-skinned and being foreigners, because some of the nationals, the Chinese nationals, are saying that they are maybe the ones who are, you know, spreading the new wave of COVID-19 cases that are being recorded over there, and the depths of desperation that have been recorded from this residents there has gone to unsurmountable levels. And there's also a story about a Wuhan lab, which I'll be letting you know more about in not too long. But looking at that main story right there on the front page, when you get to read more about it, it talks of how so many Kenyans and other nationals are stranded there, most of whom do not have food and basic needs. You know, this includes food, of course, shelter, and any finances to help them keep on surviving, because as is, some of them were evicted from their houses and the hotels that they were in, and now they have exhausted their finances. But here it says, you know, we can't raise cash for air tickets, cry stranded Kenyans who are there. This comes after the state wants to bring them home so long as they foot their airfare and pay for 14-day mandatory quarantine once they get here. And there have been some Kenyans who, you know, came together and formed a group and started to fundraise for tickets for those of whom for those of them rather that are not able to afford air tickets, and they dubbed this fundraiser as a Tuma Fair Initiative. So far, they have been able to raise some amount, and of course, there's also a spanner that has been thrown in the works when it comes to the progress that has been made so far. Here, it talks about a Kenyan flight home has also been complicated after it also emerged that China will only allow people to live after they have been placed under a 14-day mandatory quarantine at their own cost. Then they'll be allowed to board the flight. And also the Kenyan government saying once they arrive here, they will have to cater for a 14-day mandatory quarantine as well. And when you continue to read that story, you get to understand different stories from different Kenyans across the world, some who also stranded in India as they had gone to seek medical attention there. They have exhausted their finances, but they're not able to come back home due to the lockdown. But before we get to move on to the next daily, there is an interesting story right here at the bottom of the same page in regards to the spread of COVID-19. And here the U.S. accuses a Wuhan lab with 1,500 deadly viruses of causing COVID-19. So this is also one of the stories that have been highlighted there on the front page. But here it talks about Chinese high-security biosafety laboratory that is now the center of attention after U.S. claims that it may have been the cradle of the pandemic. The Chinese scientists, however, says that, you know, the virus is likely to have jumped from an animal to humans in a market that sold wildlife in Wuhan. But the existence of the lab has fueled conspiracy theories that the germ could have spread from the facility itself. Now, this facility is said to hold at least 1,500 deadly viruses, including the likes of Ebola. And these are high-risk viruses that could jump from person to person. It is said to have costed about $42 million to set up that lab that was opened back in 2018. But there's an anonymous, source who said that the virus may have accidentally come from the facility, quote unquote. And of course, President Trump did also jump on that bandwagon, saying that the U.S. will launch a thorough investigation into this case because they may have been infected by a strain. The scientists there may have been infected by a strain of a bat virus being studied at the facility, and it accidentally jumped to the population in Wuhan. You can get to read more of that story right there.
Now, on the front page of the Star this morning, there's quite an interesting headline there, why Kenya may escape COVID-19 disasters. That is according to studies where the details flow in on page 4 through 5. And just the corona hotspots around a red zone, yellow zone, and green zone. Red zone being high risk, and among the high risk zones is open air markets, bars, restaurants, gyms, salons, massage parlors, lifts, bus parks, religious places, sports activities, public gatherings. And remember, the red zone squarely falls on some of the areas restrictions that right now you see some, the bars are not opened, restaurants are only doing takeaway, There's the issue of social distancing within the public service vehicle industry. And all this has been taken care of. So maybe that's why the study shows that we might escape COVID-19 disaster. Well, that story is totally given in detail on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. So if you want to know what this study further says and just to look at what you can do to ensure that you remain safe at a time when government is insisting that indeed if you're found in flouting any of the precautionary measures, you're going to be considered exposed and taken into quarantine at your own cost. Now, further on page 6, and matters politics. State allocates a Raila 72 million shillings budget. Yes, the ODM boast is to hire temporary employees, entitled to insurance cover, and a pool of vehicles. Now, however, Raila alongside ex-Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka will wait longer for their lucrative pension benefits after the government froze 1.5 billion budget that had been allocated. The cash was also meant to cater for other former state officers, including former National Assembly Speaker, Chief Justices and their deputies, as well as vice presidents. Now, Treasury has made massive cuts on key non-functions in its supplementary budget to free up additional COVID-19 funds. However, Raila's office will still be entitled to 10 million for his employees' wages, 20 million for insurance, 26 million for purchase of vehicles and others. Then you ask, what happens to the other side? That is the office of the Deputy President. Well, it hasn't been left out, but the story goes on to put this in detail, that Ruto's office budget has been reduced by 32 million, basic salaries and travel, while PSU will have to do without the 3.9 million. And this estimate shows that the government intends to reduce development spending by 98.7 billion amid uncertainty of meeting donor targets. This just has the details flow in as to what the National Treasury is doing at this time when cash is required. Further on the same page, page 7, principals are calling for partial reopening of schools. Yes, debatable there. Just less than 24 hours there, Education Cabinet Secretary asking Kenyans, you and I, to listen to one voice, and that is appointed by government to speak on matters education. Now, a section of principals are calling for partial reopening of schools. They say if schools open before June, it is possible to recover lost time. The head teachers are rooting for partial reopening of schools in the second term to avert a crisis in the education system. Now, the proposal is pegged on government's ability to keep the virus spread in check in the next 3 months. So this partial reopening, the association has recommended that the government forgoes the second term, midterm, and reduce the August holiday to recover the time lost. Remember, we've had a change in the curriculum from 844 to the new one, 2663, 24. Yes, the new curriculum. Right now, the numbers sound very confusing, but remember the holidays. We've been having 2 major long holidays, the December holiday and the other one, and what we just had here in April. And they're saying that we need to readjust the August holidays just to accommodate the second term. All these details are captured in the Star this morning, just talking about the education sector. So you can grab a copy and get to know the finer details of that particular proposal from a section of principals who want their proposals are pegged under wanting to avert an education crisis, coming at a time when the Education Cabinet Secretary has said that all schools are accessing online studies, or rather online education. KBC has also partnered with the Institute of Curriculum Development to bring to you live from the comfort of your home lessons both for primary and secondary schools to just help in ensuring that our students and pupils, that wherever it is that they are, they get up to speed in their studies.
Newspaper, and let's take a look at what's happening in government and with our leaders. And on the front page of the Standard, we have hostile takeover, supremacy battle inside the civil war that has torn ruling party down the middle. President's camp going for control key party organ in a coup that technically kills deputy president's influence on who takes Jubilee ticket in 2022 election. The sore points are 4. 1, we have battle for Jubilee that shifts to control for top organ with authority over nominations party affair. We have number 2, President Uhuru Kenyatta's allies declare he has powers to unilaterally fill all vacant party posts. Number 3, Deputy President's camp alleged scheme to deny William Ruto opportunity to run on ruling party's ticket. And finally, number 4, the sore points. Ruto associates claim rivals are preparing ground for coalition with ODM and KANU. And just to get a glimpse of that story inside the Standard, we have Uhuru Ruto in fight to control Jubilee Party's powerful organ. And you may wonder what organ this is. Well, this is the neck organ. The daggers drawn as rival comes battle for the soul of neck, which has the ultimate say on who flies the party's flag in any elective seat. The NEC organ is a National Executive Committee, and DP allies claim rivals plotting to acquire unfettered influence over the ruling party so that they can enter pact with ODM and KANU. Uhuru Ruto in fight to control Jubilee Party's powerful organ. What will happen next? Well, that is a story. Getting to read more about what's happening with our leaders, we have in the University of Nairobi, where we have MPs that have been able to pass a supplementary budget that covers pay backdated to June 2017. University dons receive 6.6 billion shilling salary rise. The salaries might not be processed in time if Ministry of Education fails to make a quick requisition to Treasury. And the university vice chancellors of different universities have who spoke yesterday. They say that the salaries might not be processed in time. And we have a VC familiar with the process who said that the ministry must now act with speed to make an exchequer requisition for the money to be released immediately. We have a new structure where professors who earn different amounts will get an increase from different universities, including JKUAT, Kenyatta University, Tharaka Nithi University, the University of Nairobi, Koitalen University, and many others. This is on the Standard. University dons receive 6.6 billion shillings salary raise. That is the story when it comes to the Standard newspaper.
Now let's go back to the Daily Nation and look at another story here that was making headlines in regards to what is happening in the country as a result of the rainy season that we are slowly but surely getting into. One of the stories that was also still on the People's Daily, and this is in regards to the Chesagon mudslide, which the death tolls now have risen to 12 as experts warn over Lake Victoria backflow. So 8 more bodies were retrieved from the mud as Nyanza counties contend with rising lake levels. The 12 have been confirmed, and many thousands others have been displaced. The heavy rains are expected to continue pounding the areas as the Rift Valley. These were the words of the regional coordinator in the Rift Valley. And among the bodies that were retrieved was a police officer who was pulled out alive, but passed on at the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret. So many others were displaced and, of course, cramped up in makeshift structures with no food, as relief aid was yet to reach the affected areas. And there are said to be other 4,000 people who were displaced by the landslide and camped at Sambalat Primary School. And of course, this is said, this situation is expected to continue, but still looking at the same page at the bottom, it goes on to talk about how Tana River and Garissa residents are warned over rising levels in 3 dams. So the government has warned residents in Tana River and Garissa counties to move to higher grounds as the Masinga, Kindaruma and Kiambere Dam are full and could overflow within the next 2 days. And these 3 dams all combined hold millions of cubic meters of water, and they are expected to breach their banks in the next 2 days. And this is a major risk to the people who are living around them. So they are encouraged to move to higher levels before this 3 dams burst their banks and overflow into the surrounding environments. And of course, the weatherman has warned that the rains that are pouring so heavily are going to continue over the next month or so. So we need to take heed of these warnings that we are being given.
Now, quite interesting. This has been quite rife, especially on social media. And people have been saying it's the right time to get married because, I mean, you cannot have more than 15 people to guests at your wedding. So it has cut costs. Well, I don't know about that, but I can imagine a bride, you've been waiting, you know, to have that dream wedding. And because you do not want to postpone, you'd already maybe probably paid for the venue and you are ready to get married, you still have to do that. The disappointment. But on the other hand, the groom is giving a sigh of relief. Now, on the big read this morning, that's a story that has been highlighted there, just giving hints and giving just insights as to, you know, couples that have gotten married, actually wedding at a time of coronavirus outbreak. And it says it's a bittersweet moment as a groom sighs relief at shortened ceremony while bride bemoans missing out on her dream wedding, indeed. And wedding planners grapple with postponement and cancellations, you know. These are people who are also on the receiving end. And the article there just looks at different couples who've gotten married during this time. Indeed, it's good to celebrate life and love, as we say it, especially on our Sundowner program there. And you're just saying, yeah, life has to continue, whether COVID-19 is here or not. Now, however, there's another twist and turn of this corona outbreak, and it falls squarely on polygamous relationships. Now, the lockdown headache for wives in polygamous ties. For example, and this article highlights that Islam allows a man to marry up to 4 wives, provided that he provides for them justly. This is clearly put in the Quran. And there's a quote there, but if you fear you will not do justice between them, then marry all one. Now, let's go there. And a man should make sure he spends equal days with all his wives. For example, if he has 2 wives, and he decides to stay with one for 2 days, then he must spend the rest of the 2 days with the other, to be fair. However, we all know about the curfew, right? The article comes through. However, the government restricted movement in and out of Mombasa, Kilifi, Kwale, and Nairobi counties for 3 weeks as a way of combating the spread of coronavirus. And this has made the life of those in polygamy an unfair affair. The lockdown directive was a nightmare. And the person who's been interviewed for this article says it was a nightmare to her, and now she will not get the chance to spend with her husband for a good 21 days. Indeed, that's a ripple effect we're saying, and it's affecting, the COVID-19 is affecting different aspects of our lives. And there it's just a couple, the big read there this morning, if you want to just compare how all this is taking people, especially in polygamous ties, as well as those who are breathing a sigh of relief in terms of investment when it comes to tying the knot. It's a good time to get married if you look at it, but if you're in a polygamous situation, well, the director there is just is reminding me that we have a single person in the crew. We have a bachelor on set, and that is Ramaguko, so he should take time to get married at this point. I'm just worried he might not have a girlfriend or a fiance.
But the
at
question
this point
is,
who to marry?
Utawezana.
Okay, akipeo utawezana. Sasa, okay, I will not get into that.
What utawezana, Ram?
Jane has
Maybe I will get I should get a wife and marry at this time.
No. Please watch up. Now, still on the star this morning, is that world's 1.8 billion Muslims face a Ramadan like never before, and forced separation at a time when socializing is almost sacred. You're asking yourself, what's up? Now, it's days before the holy month of Ramadan begins, and the Islamic world is grappling with an untimely paradox of the new coronavirus pandemic and forced separation at a time when socializing is almost sacred. The holiest month of Islamic calendar is one for family and togetherness, community, reflection, charity, and prayer. But this year, Authorities have imposed a night curfew and banned communal prayers and other activities, so not many people see much a point in buying the lanterns. These are particular lanterns that the Muslim faithful use during this holy month of Ramadan. Everyone has to make adjustments in light of the current uncertainty that has been brought about by that unprecedented pandemic that is COVID-19. All that has been featured on the Star newspaper this morning.
And before we actually get to move to the standards, there was also conversations around the forthcoming Ramadan.
Yes.
You know, with some faithfuls requesting the government to move the curfew from 7 to maybe 9 or 10 p.m. so they can be able to, you know, get food to the needy who are not able to afford during this time. But also still part of the Islamic faithfuls were saying, you know, Easter was just around the corner, just recently, and there aren't any changes.
Yes.
All in line with keeping the guidelines in place to just ensure we are flattening this curve of infection. So maybe even as we venture into the Ramadan season, we might want to consider the same solution, all in an effort to just curb the spread of COVID-19. Of course, a topic that has been of such contention on social media and is still continuing to evolve. But of course, we're waiting to see if the government is going to make any changes in regards to this holy month of Ramadan.
But if you ask me, if we let go of the ball right now, we'll have lost it. Just yesterday, look at what our neighboring Tanzania is going through. I mean, Tanzania has, Tanzania has, for a while, has refused to put in any precautionary measures in regard to how they want to handle the
tu kutengeneza maandui hivi. Endelea.
Wewe pia shughulika na hizo mambiatsala zako pia.
Kila boxer ana deserve a fighting chance. Si nilifikiri ungependa kurudi kwa ring?
Boxer size is a great way to keep in shape.
Shape? Do you know how heavy I am?
With boxer size, you'll drop weight easily and quickly.
The Juakari operators and others, our saloonists, our mamboga, our barbers, our economy to a large extent depends on you. We cannot allow Kenyans to die because of non-distancing in any sector. So those of you who are carrying out the hair-cutting business, in barbershops, in saloons, I am appealing to you today. Ensure that social distancing, fumigation of your working places, masks are used at all times. Just assume that everybody is positive and now deal with that situation. Participation of our citizens in the fight against the disease would be our key success factor.
It's indeed a never a dull moment here in studio, and I can well say, oops, again. Okay, well, that was totally unprecedented, and we were just talking about what is happening to our neighboring country, that is Tanzania. Now, yesterday, they recorded an upsurge, I think, around 80 plus more new cases, and this is a country that has yet to put down precautionary measures to stem the spread of COVID-19. So as we're talking about how Kenya, or not just Kenyans, but the world in general is changing and adopting to this paradox that is COVID-19, that we need to take some things a little bit more seriously. Maybe that wasn't just, it was actually in connection with the conversation that Jane and I were having this morning with the calls by a section of Muslim faithfuls wanting the adjustment of the curfew, maybe to around 9 p.m. to allow them just continue, sharing with the less fortunate during this holy month of Ramadan that is around the corner. And in my opinion is that I don't think the government is willing to take that chances with that, because if we lose sight of the ball right now, we might as well, all those efforts that we've done, the 21-day lock-in of the Nairobi metropolitan area, where Kenyans are still saying they want to come back home. Imagine the ones who've been locked out. So I don't think that would change during Ramadan, but hey, let's wait and see. The government has said it's still having conversations with various stakeholders to see if Kenya needs further precautionary measures in light of the current outbreak of COVID-19. The number standing at 281 with 14 deaths so far and around 70 recoveries. So we might actually flatten the curve if you stay home and keep safe, and if you're offering those essential services as we are, take the precautionary measures that have been put in place.
Next on Corner.
I can't wait to face him in the ring again.
Sounds like a bromance in the ring.
Bromance.
Services will not be needed on this one.
But I'm the events manager of this place.
Pamela, stop being childish.
I borrowed some cash from money lenders.
You mean loan sharks?
I had a plan.
What have you got against Wangoi? It's just odd how she's always helping homeless strangers, but is indifferent.
You tried scare tactics on your mother. Why? Because there were things in that file.
Next on.
This week on Grapevine,
we got you covered.
On March 8th, he made history with a live-streamed performance from his home that saw tens of thousands of Kenyans tune in.
Kudos to Nyashinski. I think that's exactly how to do it. And if a Kenyan artist has done it so well in Kenya, I think so many artists can follow suit.
It's last year when I got my breakthrough, but after 2 years of going for auditions, probably above, almost over 15 auditions.
See you all tonight, 10 p.m. only on Grapevine.
What you gotta do? Next on.
Bei yetu inavutia zaidi.
Wako gizani na sepa tuko wazi. Hali hii haina kikwetu.
Jehe, nisikilize, usinidhulumu. Nitawaambia ichimbue mitishamba yako mibovu na kuiondoa yote kabisa na kuyaangusha mabanda yako mabovu.
Niambie, ni jinsi gani ulivyoshughulikia hilo jambo? Naomba msamaha.
On the next episode of Elena's Ghost.
Get to the hospital. Come on, let's go. Let's get you settled.
No, Monte Cristo. No, I don't like this. This isn't how I wanted to have my baby.
Elena is in danger right now. We have to go back.
No, Nina.
I just saw Monte Cristo's car. It was in an accident not far from here.
What do you mean in an accident? Pancho, tell me where she is. Elena must be in danger. Tell me where she is. I'm not leaving until you answer me. Until you look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. Karina and I have decided to set a date for our wedding. We're going to get married.
Thank you for keeping it Good Morning Kenya. We do apologize for this hitches. This is live TV. That's the beauty of live TV. Anything comes and anything goes. We take it as is. But for now, we want to close there in the headline segment, at least on this end of things, but not before we get to have a final look at a People's Daily. Doreen.
All right, so continuing with the People's Daily, and now the government turns attention to safety of health workers as coronavirus cases reach 281. Remember, the health workers have been the ones on the front line to help contain this disease. And so now the government has turned its attention to protecting health workers, often referred to as the frontliners, even as the number of infections rose to 281 after 11 more people tested positive. So this took place during the daily brief that the CS normally gives this Cabinet Secretary of Health, Mutahi Kagwe, where he said that a special designated isolation and treatment facility for healthcare workers had been opened, adding that the facility based at Kenyatta National Hospital is going to offer both critical and basic care services for this health worker. He also continued to say that this isolation and treatment facility is a product of the collaboration between the government, Rockefeller Foundation, and AMREF. And he also mentioned that the costs incurred during this treatment time shall be catered for by the government. So that means it's not going to be catered for by these health workers, but the government will stand in to ensure that these health workers are protected and taken care of in this time of the coronavirus pandemic. So moving on, this is now about the personal protective equipment. Remember that Kenyans have been making the locally made mask, some out of different kinds of clothes. And so now the locally made PPEs below set standards. This was said by the Medics Union, where the personal protective equipment that is locally manufactured for use by frontline healthcare workers do not meet local industry standard set by the Kenya Bureau of Standards. So as a result, the KMPDU wants now the local manufacturer to adhere to the standards required for the production of these masks, disposable scrubs, aprons, surgical gowns, and Hansa suits. These are some of the personal protective equipment, especially used by the healthcare workers, those in frontline, to help contain this disease. So this is just what he said, that they need to adhere to the set standard rules by KEBS, at least to ensure that, you know, they become safe for these frontliners. So moving to the counties now. Let's see what kind of stories we have in the counties, or better still, what the counties are doing to just try and stem the spread of this disease. Now, this is in Nakuru County, where Nakuru bans night fishing in Lake Naivasha, ferrying fish in Matatu. So the Nakuru County government has banned that night fishing in Lake Naivasha, and this was after reports that tens of fishermen was spending the night in water body despite the current curfew. Remember, the curfew was also just announced to help contain the spread of this disease. And so, this is through the Department of Fisheries. The county has also outlawed the transportation of fish using matatus as one way of containing the spread of this disease. Again, just ways to see how best this disease can be contained, not just here in Nairobi, but also in different counties across the country. Looking also at what other counties are doing to help contain this disease, or better still, to help protect the people living in this country, given the fact that food, being a basic commodity, is becoming so hard, especially for Kenyans, to just afford this. And so Kiambu governor gives farmers 48 million Kenyan shillings worth of maize, beans, seeds, and avocado seedlings. So the Kiambu County government has embarked on an ambitious avocado and fast maturing maize project aimed at ensuring that it becomes food secure in the wake of this pandemic. And this was mentioned by the governor, James Nyoro, who has released maize and bean seeds worth 48 million, which will be distributed to farmers across the county. So this is just what counties are trying to do to help the national government to help protect citizens in the wake of this disease, knowing that a good number of them are losing jobs in this tough time. So bringing the fact that it's even hard for them to just put food on the table. So moving to Kakamega County and what they are doing to help
curb the spread of this disease. And so the Kakamega Assembly set to pass 102 million Kenyan shillings corona budget, where the county governor Wycliffe Oparanya has said that his administration is seeking authority from the county assembly to spend 102 million earmarked for the fight against effects of this coronavirus. So this is just what the county government of Kakamega is doing to help contain the spread of this disease in this difficult time. So basically, this is what we are having on our newspaper review, and that's what we bring it to a close. Of course, we've been sampling for you the Daily Nation, the Star, the Standard, as well as the People's Daily. Jane.
This every single day right here on Good Morning Kenya. In the headlines, all about letting you know what is in the different dailies this morning. But for now, we want to get started with the day's discussion. Remember, we are live on YouTube and Facebook. Our pages are KBC Channel 1 TV on Facebook and YouTube respectively. You can also talk to us via our SMS number 20154, or if you so prefer, the social media platform. The hashtag is Good Morning Kenya. At KBC Channel 1 is our official station handle. My handle is at Jane Wamboy, and my colleagues at Ramaguko, at Remanyara, and at Doreen Arange. Now, as I had mentioned in the intro, today we're going to be continuing with our series of discussions revolving around this COVID-19 pandemic. And according to a research that was done by World Vision, it is said that, some of the secondary effects that are going to be arising from this pandemic, post the pandemic, are going to affect children the most. But why is this so? That is a discussion that we want to have right now. And joining us right now, we have with us Lillian Dozo, who is the National Director of World Vision here in Kenya. Welcome, Lillian. Glad you made time for us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Now, let's just get straight into it. Now, according to this research that was done by World Vision, it estimated about 30 million children being at risk of secondary effects from COVID-19. Tell us a bit about the background to this research that was done.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about children's issues in relation to pandemics. The research that was done is called Aftershocks. And it was released on the 8th of April 2020 by World Vision International. It is informed by our experience with the Ebola pandemic, which devastated countries in West Africa, such as Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea. And World Vision was at the forefront of that response to the Ebola crisis. And what we observed when we were responding was that much as children during the Ebola crisis were not that much affected by being infected, and there were low death rates for children, what was evident was some secondary, if you like, hidden impacts that were also occurring on children, some of which were related to lack of access to immunization, because pandemics such as Ebola, as is the case with COVID-19, can cause a lot of pressure, especially on weak health systems.
Now, still looking at, coming back to this research, it is said that, from this pandemic of COVID-19, children are going to be affected more with the side effects, the secondary effects, as opposed to COVID-19 itself. Why is this the situation?
This is so because, again, drawing on our Ebola experience, when you have overburdened health systems, it means that some of the primary health care that are normally provided by health systems, such as vaccinations, such as treating diseases like diarrhea, pneumonia, that affect children, will not get that focus that normally would be given by healthcare systems. So you find that children continue to suffer from those diseases. It could also be because of fear by caregivers to take them to those health services. So children will be dying from those preventable diseases that normally would be treated. And then also with the guidelines that have been given as well, restrictions on movements, lockdowns, there's also an increase as well in areas related to child protection. You find that there's an increase in sexual violence on children. There's increase as well in some of these negative cultural practices that are now happening because of children being out of school, like child marriage, like FGM, as well as child labor, as children are sent out to also meet the needs of families that are under a lot of economic stress right now.
All right. I would like for us to look at some of those areas that are said to be going to be affecting our children the most. And let's just start by looking at these other deadly diseases that are sort of being overlooked during this time. From the research that, was conducted, what are some of these deadly diseases that are going to pose a potential high risks to our children post the COVID-19 pandemic?
Diseases such as malaria, diseases such as pneumonia, and then some such diseases, malnutrition as well. Because, as these restrictions are happening, quite a number of households have also lost their income. And that causes a problem of food insecurity. And with food insecurity, there's a rise in malnutrition in children. So if children are not getting the attention that they deserve through these healthcare systems, because the focus is on COVID-19, we could see an increase in deaths from malnutrition, an increase in deaths from preventable diseases like pneumonia, as well as malaria and other such diseases.
So how then do we try to ensure that the progress that has been made so far is not really thrown off the tracks when it comes to dealing with some of these deadly diseases that have always been affecting our children the most?
What we need to make sure is ensure that as we communicate prevention messaging around COVID-19, we also focus on child protection messaging to make sure that parents and caregivers are aware that they need to make sure that children stay safe at home, and also ensuring that healthcare systems make provision for other activities such as immunization to continue, even if they set aside areas in healthcare systems where mothers and caregivers are able to continue to bring children for such services. It's important that that is done. And then also communicating to caregivers that they should not be healthcare centers, especially if separate areas which are risk-free or where risk is mitigated are set up for them, then that should be communicated to caregivers so that they know that they are able to take children to healthcare centers so that all these other activities like immunization, like vaccines can continue. And we can also implement other activities like communicating, broadcasting using different media like radios. I know that in Osiligi, for example, World
All right, we are getting right back into that conversation with Lillian Doze over there. Remember, we are talking about the secondary effects that are said going to be very harsh on our children post the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're just trying to look at some of those factors that were highlighted from this research that was done by World Vision. Of course, pegging on the previous pandemics that have hit the world. Classic example was during the COVID-19, the Ebola pandemic, apologies for that hit the world, and the consequences were felt most by our children. Now, getting back to the conversation, Lillian, another area that you have mentioned that is going to really affect our children is when it comes to food security and nutrition. Now, looking at the fact that so many schools have been closed across the world, and you find that there are millions of children, approximately about 310 million children who actually relied on school meals to just get through the day. What now happens to these children who school was their source of nutrition?
Yes, that's another source of concern, because that also could be one high cause of malnutrition. Because as you said, that a lot of children are benefiting from these school feeding programs, and for some, that was the only source of a nutritious meal that they were getting in a day. So what we are promoting as World Vision, and I know that other stakeholders, including government, are doing the same, is to make sure that we identify and register all those vulnerable families that could be food insecure and implement cash transfers to them to give them that capacity to be able to purchase food at household level and to provide for the children's nutritional status.
All right, now looking at some long-term solutions that can be put in place for some of these children to ensure, even when we are having such pandemics, even in future, that, the source of food and nutrition is not as compromised as it is right now. What are some of those long-term solutions that you think the international community could come together and put in place for our children?
Long-term solutions would be to really focus at how of families by ensuring that we really strengthen their economic capacity. Resilience building programs that help families to have access to income. You know, World Vision, we implement some long-term development projects like savings group, what we call savings for transformation, which encourage families to be able to have access to services that help them to make at family level, and other income generating income power. Those are some of the things that international organizations and organizations such as World Vision could do to really make sure that long-term economic security at household level.
All right, now let's quickly move on to another aspect that was also heavily highlighted as a consequence from this pandemic, and this is the health system. Now, a fact that has come to broad light is that, you know, COVID-19 has brought out the realities of our health systems, and not just here in Kenya or in Africa, but the world as a whole. Looking at how compromised our health care systems are, paint a picture for us, you know, from what you did from this research. What was the image that you got from looking at the compromised healthcare systems?
The image we got from the Ebola experience was that our health systems are quite weak. And like I said earlier, when a pandemic such as COVID-19 comes on, that further overburdens the already weak health systems. So what is important is for our governments to know that there's a need to really focus on health systems strengthening, because without strong health systems, it's very difficult to be effectively responsive to pandemics such as Ebola, as well as to pandemics such as COVID-19. And this is what renders children vulnerable, because once resources are focused on addressing the pandemic, other much needed primary and tertiary care becomes neglected. And this is when we see devastating secondary impacts on children, where they become affected by all sorts of other preventable diseases that can end up increasing the death rates of children that could have been avoided.
And also still looking at the healthcare system, you know, there has been a noted increase in the number of maternal and neonatal mortality due to some of these directives and, you know, measures that are being put in place by our governments to just try and flatten this curve of infection. How then do we factor in, you know, mothers who are in marginalized areas, who are losing their children and consequently their lives because they're not able to get to medical facilities due to the curfews that have been put in place?
Well, we have to really make sure that our community-based resources are activated and we heighten monitoring. By community-based resources, I'm referring to people or utilizing resources like assistant chiefs, making sure that our area advisory councils are meeting regularly and keeping track and monitoring all those marginalized families and vulnerable families that need to have access to protection and access to services. Also making sure that our children protection officers as well are also working and monitoring on a daily basis and providing reports through their counties, and these reports also escalated to national level so that appropriate action can be taken to make sure that vulnerable children have access, are protected, have access to health services, and that if they're going through any cases of child protection issues, that those are also addressed. So monitoring, heightening monitoring, and also giving access or permission to children officers to also be considered as essential services, because right now I believe that they are not, and yet they could play quite a critical role at community level in helping to monitor and report some of those cases to local authorities.
And speaking of child protection, you know, systems, there has been a noted increase in the number of, you know, sexual offences cases that have been reported just here in Kenya. It is said to have gone up by 30% in the month of March alone. And this has also consequently been as a result of the unavailability of safe houses due to crowding. Now, for children who are in environments where, you know, they are not safe, they are being defiled, they are facing all this gender-based violence, and of course, it is the ripe season from some of these cultural practices. How then do we best protect them during this time and just help lessen the impact that they're going to feel post the pandemic?
We have to use our community-based mechanisms to identify those children and register them. And I know that we can also put in place what we call foster care families that can take care of children that are either abandoned right now or alone because either their caregivers are isolated or in quarantine. We need to make sure that we follow up, monitor and register all those children and foster care is provided for them. There are programs that can be put in place by organizations such as ourselves in partnership with county governments, with county commissioners and area advisory councils to make sure that those vulnerable children have foster care. And then we can also have case workers that can also be supervising and making random visits to those foster families to make sure that the children are taken of well. And then, like I said earlier on, cash transfers can also be introduced to make sure that those families that take on children that may be left alone are also provided with resources to ensure that they can also take care of those children through those cash transfers.
All right, and what about children who are in extreme situations where they may not have, not surrounded by adults or a neighborhood that is that accommodative, and they're facing so much discrimination and stigmatization as a result of being in the care, under the care of caregivers who might be taking advantage of them? How then do we increase awareness levels to reach these children, to let them know that there are avenues through which they can be able to get help?
Use broadcasting through radios, and like I said earlier on, World Vision is using an innovation where we are actually sending out vehicles to communities using loudspeakers to reach all the remote villages to make sure that people are informed on some of the child protection issues and mechanisms that are available to them, as well as popularizing the child helpline, the government's child helpline 116, which people should know that is available for them to call and report any suspected cases of child protection issues. So popularizing those numbers, 116, and also popularizing toll-free number 1195, and then using some of these simple mechanisms like radios, like loudspeakers and APs going from village to village to make sure that people are informed are some of the simple ways that we can make sure that that message is relayed. And then even in the daily updates, for those that have access to television and radios, daily updates that are given by government, we should make sure that child protection updates are also given in those daily updates. They have a wide reach nationally to make sure that people know what they need to do to make sure that children that are staying at home are safe and protected, and the hotlines that they need to call when they have any suspected cases.
So how then do we now bring in the local governments down at the county levels to just make sure that they are at the forefront when it comes to championing for all rights and all other efforts that involve protecting our children, especially, and shielding them from some of these effects? The role of the county government.
And the key thing that the county governments could do is the county commissioners making sure that the area advisory councils are playing their role, meeting virtually as we respect social distancing, to make sure they receive daily updates from those community mechanisms that are in place. Because area advisory councils can have a reach at county level, at sub-county level, and they can also make sure that they receive that information in those reports and document all that information, escalate it to the counties, and also escalate it to the national level so that the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection is also informed of what is happening around child protection issues. So activating all those key mechanisms that exist already at county level is important.
All right, now, as we draw the conversation to a close, maybe you could tell us a bit about the World Vision response plan that is being put in place to just ensure that the secondary effects of COVID-19 are not as harsh as they are expected to be on our children.
Is actually activating our child protection mechanisms at community level to make sure that we work with area advisory councils, we work with assistant chiefs, and we also work with government child protection officers to make sure that cases are reported, they're identified, and we're also popularizing information about the helplines that need to be utilized event that there are child protection issues that are identified. We are also working to ensure that we relay messaging around child protection issues, not only around COVID-19, washing hands, social distancing, but also laying emphasis on child protection to make sure that as children stay at home, caregivers make sure that children are safe, children are protected, and if they find any suspected cases, we also give them information to know where they should report it. So those are some of the activities that we are doing. We are also working with key stakeholders to make sure that those child protection mechanisms that normally exist at county level continue to be functional. We're engaging with county commissioners, county governments to make sure that they continue to be functional, and also working with other partners to make sure that we implement cash transfers to those vulnerable communities that have had their economic livelihoods negatively impacted by COVID-19 or by the restrictions that have been imposed, so that they continue to provide nutritious meals for their children, and children have good state of nutrition as they go through this difficult period.
And maybe your message to some of the adults out there who are in a direct contradiction of some of these measures that we are being told to observe, issues like social distancing, putting on a mask, avoiding going out unnecessarily, and still coming back to environments where children are and putting them at risk.
My message would be we need to all be responsible. Listen to being provided to us by WHO and by our national government, because we all have a responsibility not only for ourselves, but for each other. And if we continue to be irresponsible, we are not only putting ourselves at risk, but also others at risk. So it's everybody's responsibility to follow the guidelines, to make sure that we wash our hands constantly, we wear masks, and we stay at home. We only go out when we absolutely need to, but stay at home as much as we can. That is the only way that we can slow down the spread of this infection and we can get back to our normal lives.
All right, thank you so much. That is Lillian Dozos, just in our Women at the Forefront segment. She is the National Director of World Vision here in Kenya, sharing more insight in regards to this research that was done by World Vision, which clearly indicated that children are at the highest risk from suffering the secondary effects of COVID-19, and ultimately these include other deadly diseases, issues to do with malnutrition, a compromise healthcare, and of course basic necessities. And of course these are issues that we need to start looking into right now before we get to a situation where 30 million children are going to be exposed to the secondary effects of COVID-19 as opposed to COVID-19 itself. So these are conversations that we are going to be continuing. These are conversations we will be having more and more here on Good Morning Kenya to help you better understand why it is important to follow these directives that we are being given to ensure that post this pandemic, it is not a chaotic situation, and most especially for our children. That is that for that segment, but do stay with us. We have more of Good Morning Kenya coming up, and of course, there is a helpline for children who are in vulnerable situations and may not have access to adults or caregivers who might be in a position to help them. So if you know a child who is in a situation where they are being abused, they're not being taken care of, you can always use the helpline 116 to get assistance down to these children. Or if you are that child, you can always call that number, that is 116, to be able to get the assistance that you need as a child or as a caregiver to protect these children during this time. Now we take a break, but we'll be right back with more of Good Morning Kenya. Do keep talking to us using the hashtag Good Morning Kenya. See you after the break.
Telenovela is all about family, all about relationships, that build up betrayals, revenge,
I am the only one to blame for all of your faults. So now you admit it. Please shoot her now!
tempers flaring,
You and your people used Monte Cristo to bankrupt my husband's ranch, and you know it.
Go back or I'll kill her.
And ultimately, it's all about love. Telenovelas on KBC Channel 1. Elena's Ghost, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Behind Closed Doors, Sundays at 10 p.m.
Some of the greatest people we meet are women. Women who understand that fear is nothing more than an obstacle that stands in the way of progress.
A few minutes later, he put his hand up my skirt. This lady had been in an abusive marriage. I was terrified.
Been set up.
You've been set up by your boss?
Yes.
This is how shocking it is.
Yeah.
The lucky ones and the strong ones are the ones who go out and start talking about it.
Women who understand that when life hits you hard, you do not tremble, but instead you hit back harder.
Everything that you do has consequences. The moment we do not speak about sexual violence, we are effectively condoning the practice.
Doing things right is a challenge, but doing things right consistently is a greater challenge.
An event can happen in your life and it instantaneously changes the way you do things. Living my life reflectively.
We need to learn how to have those hard conversations. We just have to know when to say no.
Power is not given to you, you have to take it. And it's only when we truly embrace the power we have as women that we achieve remarkable things against all odds. Dadas, this Sunday at 4 p.m.
Huyu nani baba?
Kwa taarifa yako.
You guys, leave me alone. Huwa haraka. Wanifanya mimi mpumbavu.
How many times must I tell you?
You've got to take responsibility of your actions. You can get out of here.
Unasemaje?
Umse stai kumona kwa ikeja.
Polamuleti.
The boss. Kila siku kila nikikukanya wewe usikii waleta ukibadilisha.
Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying.
If I don't get my money today, I am telling you.
Game is over.
All right, thank you very much for keeping it KBC. Remember, we are live on Facebook. At Facebook Channel 1 is the Facebook page. Make sure that you drop us your comment even as you continue with these morning conversations. Jane was just having one in regards to the secondary effects of the COVID-19 or the coronavirus, especially when it comes to our children. Remember, as a nation, we now stand at 281 confirmed cases of COVID-19. And the number of recovered cases are standing at 69. The number of deaths in the country now currently stands at 14. And in the global perspective, in terms of the numbers worldwide, we are above or over 2 million, actually 2.4 million people of confirmed cases worldwide. Globally, we have the number of recovered cases standing at over 651,000. The number of deaths globally now stands at over 170,000. These are the statistics in regards to the COVID-19 cases, both in Kenya and in the global perspective. But even as we talk about the effects of coronavirus this morning, I'll be having a discussion on that, and we'll be looking at the effects of COVID-19, especially when it comes to those in need, the poor and the low-income earners in the nation. Remember, so far, we had a call by the government, both in the national and in the county levels, in regards to making sure that organizations, we have philanthropists, individual philanthropists or corporates putting their hands also on the deck, making sure that we all join hands in solidarity to help those in need, especially when it comes to helping those who do not have the ability to get face masks, to get hand sanitizers, to get water. Basic needs are still a struggle when it comes to Kenyans acquiring them. But what are we doing as a nation to help those in need? Well, so many people have been able to come and are at the forefront to help Kenyans. Remember, let me take you back a bit. A few years ago, we had Kenyans came down in the spirit of togetherness to show solidarity, in the spirit of oneness, one nation, one Kenya. All Kenyans came to form Kenyans for Kenya. You remember that hashtag? When Kenyans came together during that period where we had drought. Kenyans came together at that point. And so far, right now, we need Kenyans to do it again. Well, I'll be having a discussion with Reverend Matthew Okey, who is the Executive Director from the African Inland Child and Community Agency for Development, ICAD, to give us his take on what they're doing when it comes to supporting communities. And this group, this NGO, has come and they are so far, as of now, they are in Kibera. They have distributed face masks. They are already providing hand sanitizers. They're providing food for free. Well, that discussion will be coming up in a bit. But Doreen, who is joining me on the other side of the studio.
All right, so this issue of coronavirus, here in the country, globally, just like Ram has mentioned earlier on, we have reported 281 confirmed cases here in the country, and this was after 11 more confirmed cases. 11 more cases were confirmed as of yesterday, a number of deaths, a number of recoveries, not just here in Kenya, but in the entire African continent as well as the entire globe. South Africa, in the African continent, still leads with the number of confirmed cases, with over 3,000 cases in this in that specific country. But the issue of gender-based violence has risen so much during the wake of this pandemic, not to say that it wasn't there before. Yes, it was, but as of now, during this coronavirus pandemic, where a number of countries are on lockdown, not just in Africa, but across the globe as well, a number of countries have also just announced restriction of movement, all this in a bid to contain the spread of this disease. Also, a number of countries just announcing measures, precautionary measures to help contain the spread of this disease. But this issue of gender-based violence, just like I had mentioned, it has become more of a challenge in this difficult time. And just from this article, it shows that now more men than women, of course, more men than women are dying of this COVID-19. And of course, women make up 75% of the healthcare workforce. This is, of course, here in the country and even beyond. They are the ones who are supposed to also just take care of the children at home, but they also make up a bigger percentage of this workforce. So that means they're on the front line to help contain the spread of this disease. So also this means that a number of children might be at home alone, probably with fathers or with healthcare, or with nannies, not necessarily with their mothers. But this article shows, and it's just a statement that was mentioned by the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, where he says that many women and girls under COVID-19 lockdown now suffer violence at home where they should be safe, but they are now suffering violence in a place where they need to be safe. And this is women and girls to be specific. And in Kenya, of course, the national helpline has also been given. And from this national helpline, it recorded that in the month of, actually it shows that the cases of gender-based violence, GBV, have increased. In the month, in March, the cases were at 115, which have risen to up to 80. Actually, this is in February, they were 115, but they have risen up to 86 cases, bringing the number to about 33+% in just a span of 3 weeks. And this is when the curfew, the dusk to dawn curfew, was announced here in the country. So you can imagine, just in a span of 1 month, over 86 cases have been recorded through this helpline of people recording gender-based violence, and a significant number of these people include the women and children solely. But we look at some of the leading forms of this violence that especially the women and girls are facing. Of course, among them include physical assault, psychological torture, and defilement. And just like I mentioned, this is a number that was recorded in that period when the dusk to dawn curfew was announced here in the country. You can imagine how the numbers are rising, and also more stringent measures are being announced here in the country, with the cases rising not just in the in the larger city centers, but also moving to the peri-urban centers, or if you made the rural areas. So you can imagine if that is where we are going as a country. So that ultimately means that more stringent measures will continue to be announced here in the country. So what does that mean for this issue of women and girls just recording this high number of gender-based violence in this difficult time? But the abusers also feel like they're justified in the reasons as to why they would probably subject the women or girls or even the male gender into this issue of gender-based violence. Remember that the issue of GBV is not just that happens to women and girls. It is more prevalent in women and girls, but it cuts across both genders. But look at this. The mini lockdown, of course, announced by ordered by the government in a bid to tackle the spread of this pandemic, of course, which includes directives such as staying at home, and also decision by some employers to lay off workers and have others take pay cuts or even unpaid leave, is surely a recipe for stress and tension amid economic hardships. Remember, people have been losing their jobs. Others have been forced to part away with pay cuts. Others have been asked to go home indefinitely, not knowing when they would come back. So this, of course, would lead to stress. It will lead to tension because it is a tough time in terms of economy. It is a difficult economic times for people that are suffering, especially people that are going through this. And of course, for the abusers, they are saying that this could be justifiable because I'm undergoing stress, I'm undergoing hardships, I do not have an income, I do not have food. So anything I meet on the way, if it's a woman, if it's a girl, or whatever kind of gender, they just feel they need to subject this kind of people to this violence. And remember, we talked about this kind of violence being both physical assault, psychological torture, where someone can talk to you whichever way they want. And so these abusers just saying that they could be justified because of the reasons that I just gave earlier. But really, is this really justified? Because as it is, all of us are going through hardships in this difficult times because we are affected in one way or the other. But it does not mean in any way that you subject someone into any kind of physical assault or torture just because it is a tough time and a difficult time for you. But look at what it continues to say in terms of this gender-based violence, of course, and this is now globally. What we are looking at earlier was here in Kenya, and of course I was giving you the helpline and the number of recorded cases for the past 2 months since when the dusk to dawn curfew was announced, since when the stay-at-home was announced, especially for those that do not need to go anywhere. That was just in Kenya, but also globally, it is still happening globally. This means it's across the globe, and it's still happening for, again, women and girls still facing this gender-based violence. And I just continues to say, amidst these lockdowns that is happening in these different countries, it is also just a tough time for them. And women and girls, again, still on the global scale, still the ones most susceptible to this GBV. And it just continues to say that it needs to be it is a time that they need to be at a safe place. They need to actually stay at home. As people are staying at home, it is a time where they need to be safe, they need to be taken care of. And like I mentioned, this is across both genders, but it just continues to show that both women and girls, even across the globe, are still facing this issue. This is a discussion that you also had some time last week in terms of gender-based violence and how cases are being reported here in the country, especially in the wake of this pandemic. Do you feel we can do, just from your own personal perspective, do you feel we can do something more to just ensure we do not subject probably our women, girls, or even the male gender to this GBV? Because it is a time where people need to be safe at home in the wake of this pandemic.
You know, what the saddest bit is about all this information is that there was some research that was done by UN, and it did indicate that during this pandemic, at least a third of all global women are facing some form of violence. Either could be sexually based, could be physically based, any sexual and gender-based violence. A third of the entire global population of women are facing one form of a violation or the other. And the worst hit place was actually Kosovo. And bringing it back to Kenya, you know, the cases that you had mentioned, you know, having risen from 85 in February up to 115 in March. And this came, you know, from the status update that we got from the CJ himself, an increase of 33% in less than a month. Where are we headed? And you know the saddest bit about this, Doreen, some of these perpetrators are justifying this. And there was actually a case of a gentleman in... this was where they didn't indicate. It was actually during the beginning of this month where there was a story of a 16-year-old girl, her name withheld due to the fact that she's a minor. She was kidnapped, held captive, and sexually abused for 4 days. And do you know what the attacker said as to justify why he did that? He actually said, and I quote, he needed female company to get through this government-imposed lockdown.
Imagine.
And it is the neighbors who rescued this young girl, a 16-year-old. And you can actually justify this using a measure that is supposed to protect us all, and you go to an extent of using it as an excuse to be a perpetrator, a sexual offender.
Yes,
where are we headed?
Let me put across one point. Even as we talk about gender-based violence, in as much as we're talking about people are supposed to be staying at home, we had the health CAS, Dr. Mwangangi. She had said that even as we talk about people being in their homes and people keeping social distancing and all these measures, we should not forget that the law has not yet been suspended. The law is not taking a break. And let me echo that. Even as we talk about, COVID-19, let's remember we are not fighting ourselves. We are fighting the coronavirus. The law has not yet been put on hold. The law is still there. And people who are found to engage in gender-based violence should be held culpable, and they should be incriminated, in my view.
Absolutely. And should face the highest form of punishment, because this is not a time to be taking advantage. And the worst case, D, is that, some of these cases that are being reported, the perpetrators that are involved are people who are either relatives or caregivers to some of these children that are being involved, that have the cases that have been reported. These are people that these children trust and love. And they are still the same people who actually go ahead and turn against them and take advantage of them. So in as much as it is a time to stay at home, it is a time to, help flatten the curve of infection, it does not mean that we go ahead and take advantage of our children, especially given the fact that we don't know how long they are going to be at home. And some of them, going to school was their escape. Going outside was their escape, but now they are forced to stay indoors and stay with some of these perpetrators, and it is grueling and it's very cruel on these children. And especially now that, safe houses are not an option due to social distancing, and those that are available cannot take up all these children. So we need to do better as caregivers and as protectors of these children.
Exactly, and Jane, you really rightly put it, and also that example that you gave us of a man who was justifying himself because of inflicting this kind of things, especially to women and girls. Such a difficult time, but just like we've all said, it is a time where, in as much as you're staying at home, we need to keep safe and ensure that we take care of one another. But of course, we'll continue this discussion, just unpacking more of what has been happening in regards to this issue of gender-based violence, seeing how these numbers are going up, especially across the globe. This will be on our last segment where we'll continue to do this. Ram.
Make sure that you give us your thoughts and your comments in regards to this. Do you think that something needs to be done when it comes to combating gender-based violence, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic? The hashtag is Good Morning Kenya. Tag me at Ramaguko, at Jane Omboy, at Doreen Arange, at Ray Manyara. We are also live on Facebook, so if at all you also want to comment there, head over to Facebook, drop your comments. We shall sample them up at the tail end of this morning conversion, okay? Now, moving forward, as I said earlier, we Kenyans need to show this a sign of solidarity to one another. As a nation, we need to stand with each other. Well, what are we doing when it comes to this? Philanthropists, organizations, entities, individuals, companies, corporates have been called upon to put their hands together and share and contribute to Kenyans when it comes to fighting COVID-19. Well, joining me live, joined by Reverend Matthew Okelo. He is the Executive Director for the African Inland Child and Community Agency for Development, known as ICAD. Good morning, Reverend. You stand with Kenyans, and maybe you can start first of all by knowing what is ICAD all about?
Thank you, Ram, for having me on board. ICAD is an NGO part of African Inland Church, which is entrusted to work with the children. Our main focus is to make sure that the child live in a dignified life, and as an organization, we exist to promote the development of vulnerable children to achieve their full physical, intellectual, and social and spiritual potential by providing safe space and championing children's rights and strengthening the community fiber. And that is what we are doing. Our main focus as an organization, NGO part of African Inland Church, is child development, women economic power and the empowerment and development, and we also focus on youth livelihood development. That is our main focus, and that is all about African Inland Child Community Agency for Development.
All right. All right. And so far, when it comes to what you are doing and reaching out to the communities, how far are we when it comes to the reception that you're getting from the people? How are people receiving you?
Around the country, that is Nairobi, where we are down in Kibera, and we are also in Meru, where we have a rescue center, Kisumu, where we do OVC and rescuing and women, the community development. We are also in Narok, where we rescue the girls from early marriage. We are also in Wasingishu and Trans Nzoia, where we also do the rescuing of children. Basically, the reception is quite well. We are down in the community, being local.
All right. We will be getting in touch with the Reverend in a bit. Remember, he's giving us his take on what the communities are doing, what NGOs are doing when it comes to standing with Kenyans. As you can see on your screen, these are what took place when they went to give out free hand sanitizers. They gave out free gloves. They gave out free face masks when they were moving in different communities in and around Kibera. And remember, they are also moving around in different regions of the nation, even as you talk about, giving out charity to the people. Remember, not everyone can be able to afford all these commodities when it comes to face masks, when it comes to hand sanitizers, when it comes to washing their hands. Not everyone can be able to afford all these things, as we talk about them being a basic necessity for all Kenyans. Well, Reverend, so you are talking about you are painting us a picture of how people receive you on the ground. Please continue.
Yes, what I was saying that as an organization, being an organization who is focused on the vulnerable, we are actually deep into the community where the rubber meets the road, the real vulnerable people. This is, and our focus is the child. Here we say that when we move into a community, our focus is the child, but we are looking at the surrounding of the child. Who is with the child? Who is with the child? Here with the child, you'll find women. In the child, around the children, you'll find youth who are vulnerable, women who are vulnerable, and even men who are vulnerable. So the reception is so great, and we are just down with them, we feel with them, and we walk with them.
And you've mentioned women, men, children, every person who is vulnerable. How are you able to move in from one community or the other, you know, picking out people that need all these necessities? Because you've mentioned that, you know, people are vulnerable, and you are focusing on children, you know, generally or specifically.
Okay, what we do when we have been in the of the children home, institutionalizing children for over 40 years. And 10 years ago, we had changed the tax, so we closed all the children homes except 6 in that is, and we changed these homes to rescue centers. The reason why we were doing this, we realized that the children belongs well, fits well in the community and in the family. Family is very key in bringing up children, especially even the children who are vulnerable. So as we went doing this, we mapped our areas where we have been having children's homes, and then we moved into the community. For instance, we went and found a widows, and you find a widow with 4 children, one children's home, you realize you will not help this widow because you have left this widow with 3 children. So what we did, we started a program known as child-centered community development, whereby we go and have the most lowest women in the community, and then we mobilize them and we help them to realize how can we develop them, train them in a way that they will be able to take care of their children, the four orphans that they are left with. And this has endeavored us into the community. And are actually living in an balanced environment are the ones that we actually take to the rescue centers. And as we take them to rescue centers, we involve the government, we involve the chief to mitigate and help the problem that has made the child to be taken to a children's home, so that we can be able to integrate back this child to the community. And this is how yes.
Sorry for as you continue describing that, you mentioned taking them to rescue centers, children, even those who are found to have, you know, been victims of gender-based violence. How then do you go through that whole process of giving them help? We're talking about psychological help, counseling. We're talking about even training them in a way that pertains to their needs.
In our centers, we have social workers who will follow up their case, and we are also working with the children officers, the government children officers, who will actually work with us in order to help the community. But for the child in the community, we have the social workers who are actually trained and will be able to help the children, counsel them to come out of the trauma that they have gone through due to the violence that they have gone through. And again, we are also working with the judiciary, because these children, sometimes we have to take their cases to the court, so that to the court, so that they will be able to give guidance. And in case whereby the children have been having problems with their caregivers or their parents, there are cases whereby we haven't reconciled these children with their parents, because sometimes a parent or a caregiver really traumatized or victimized because of the situation they are also going through. So we also make sure that our social workers would not only work with the children, but they also reach out to the caregivers and to see what challenges are they going through that can make them turn violence to the children. So our approach is so much holistic in nature.
So at the end of the day, you also not only remove those who are victims and give them to caregivers, you also investigate to find out why are they victims.
Exactly. We investigate, and in most cases, we always want to integrate back the children to a safer environment after the rescue. Where it is impossible, then we actually get caregivers. Or, for instance, in our rescue center in Narok, we realize it is not very easy to integrate back the girls. So sometimes we work with the government to allow us to keep the girls for some time until they are mature enough and take them to school. But cases whereby the community is friendly, we also try to help the community to understand these children so that they can prepare the ground for integration. You know, one thing about the vulnerable children or the orphans and those children who are vulnerable, they are also human beings, and also they need identity. So if you just take them away completely from the community, it's actually not going to help them. Especially when they grow up, they will have negative attitude towards the community. But we are trying to help them understand and even forgive. Remember, in our approach is also spiritual, as much as we want them to keep safe.
Okay.
So that's why we also work within the community to help them understand the situation of these children.
And you talked about giving them also spiritual nourishment. How are you able to do that, especially in this time of the pandemic where people are not allowed to gather? This time where people are encouraged to keep social distancing?
Well, we have our social workers who are working remotely with the caregivers, and we try to keep social distance. But for the children that we have actually quarantined, very few that are in the rescue centers, we always have their social workers and a pastor that goes in and give actually some teachings. But as of now, we try to use the social media to send messages. We record some of the teachings and send the social workers and send to the caregivers so that they can share with the children wherever they are. So they are a little bit challenging because somehow in the rural area, the network and all that is not very clear.
And you've mentioned about a network reaching those who are in the rural areas being poor. Now, which brings me to find out, paint to us a picture of the challenges you face as you are on the ground, as you are trying to provide for the needs of the different communities.
Well, some of the challenges we face as we work with these people, especially right now because of this problem, is that you realize that these people in the community, they have real challenge. Take, for example, right now we have to put on the masks. These people are people who are living from hand to mouth. They go out every morning to look for food so that they can eat. And the little they have, you will ask yourself, will they buy the mask or they will buy food? You realize that they will go for the latter. They will buy food so that they continue. Somehow, because of the desperation that they are going through, they tend to rationalize this problem by saying that God will take care of us. We don't have much, but this one is too bad. So, you know, when you just rationalize the problem that God will take care of you because of the situation you are going through, that makes you more vulnerable. So as we reach these people, you realize that sometimes because of their situation, they will throw off the guidelines and move on. Say, I will die because I'm looking for food for my children, then let it be so. This is a real challenge. So that is why we always we go to help them, to listen to them. And again, the financial challenges. These people who are actually selling. They are hoping that some of them are actually selling their omenas or small business. And right now, they can't get anything. What do they do?
All right, we have All right, Prof. Reverend will be, as you're getting your sound to give us the more challenges. You know, you've just highlighted a few things that are being faced on the ground. People having to choose between looking for food and buying face masks. At the end of the day, some of these communities do not have the ability to get both. So they have to choose between food, face masks. Other communities don't even have water. So even as you look forward to providing solutions to this, how lasting can this whole process be?
We really don't know how this is going to last, but we will, and because even right now we are even scared of how it will go, because the situation is getting worse day and night, especially down there. So we really don't know how far it will go, but we are hopeful that things will work out, because really not move fast to enhance the issue of food and how these people can be reached. It is going to be bad. Another thing I would say, that I would want to say, which is a challenge and it's very practical in the places where we are working, is the information. Information. Like right now, we are told that the government has wired some money to people. How do we follow up this? Because the majority you talk to will tell you they have never received anything. Don't know how to get into a way of getting this money. And the information also against about this disease is not well received, because some of them are still very, they don't understand it, how it is happening, and the reason why they are told to keep distance and all that. So the information on the grassroots is not very clear.
And as you talk about information on the grassroots, all right, we are losing you a bit, Reverend. But even as talk about information on the grassroots,
yes,
how are you able to reach out to these people? Because now they may not be aware about everything that is going on. They may not be able to get access to information. As you provide food and all the necessary commodities that they need, how are you looking into to also provide them with the necessary information to understand why we need face masks, why we need hand sanitizers, why we need to regularly maintain proper hygiene, to get all the necessary information that has been provided from the government down to these different communities?
Well, what we do, we try to make this information very simple by giving this information to the community volunteers that we are working with across. And we make the message very simple to them. And sometimes we use the simple words that are used in the villages to make them understand the aspect of this disease.
In the dialects.
Yes. And we use the languages that the local language, because we work with the communities, the community volunteers, which are actually living within the community. So these are the people we give the simple information and how they can actually reach these people with this simple message. And you realize when we were actually down in Kibera, we were able to, in what we were installing, we were able to make the message very clear to them. Just wash your hands, keep yourself, protect yourself in order to protect another person. You see? And you see, there are also some cultural practices that is very hard to live. For instance, you go to the village, you find an elderly woman who believes in shaking hands. So you really need to know how do you make it easy for this woman to understand that we cannot shake hands, and the reason why you are keeping distance to these from them. So we are really using the community volunteers to help us make this message easy.
You're doing some good work there. Now let's come back to Kibera. You are in Kibera. I don't know when you are in Kibera. You maybe can tell us around which period you are there. What so far have you been able to do specifically in Kibera? Because we have seen images, videos of you down there. You know, how deep have you gone?
In Kibera, you know, Kibera is where we work, and we have a technical vocational training in Kibera. So we have actually interacted with the community there for several years. And now, when this thing came up, we watched around and we realized the most vulnerable group that were not targeted were the borders. That is why you see we made some masks, and then we decided to distribute those masks to the borders group, to the leaders, to go and distribute this to them. We have gone quite a bit, because that's where we actually are working from as we reach the vulnerable group there. We have also installed some hand washing stations there, where you have seen us, especially in the stages where people are actually taking these borders and even taking matatus. So we have been able to have those people install those hand washing in partnership with other development partners that we always do work with down in Kibera. And we are hoping that as we work together with these groups, so that we will be able to, on a daily basis, be able to help this group. There's another group that is there that we are working with down in. These are single girls, those who have actually their children, and they are going out to look for children. And this is what we have been training them in our TVET center, where they actually learn technical skills to help them be self-reliant. And you see, they have children. So we were having childcare centers, where they come to the college with their children, and someone takes care of their children as they go to class. You remember, this cannot happen now because the college is closed. So we have formed a place where we can also reach them. They can actually come into the center for one by one, and be able to get some help, as our partners also bring those help in our center, where we are actually working in AIC Training Center.
And as you work with all these communities, all these people, let's talk about your reach. How far is your reach nationwide?
Nationwide, right now we are in 6 counties around the world, around Kenya. That is we are in Makueni, we are in Meru, we are in Homa Bay, we are in Kisumu, we are in Narok, and here in Nairobi.
Okay. And here in Nairobi, you're based in Kibera. But as we bring this discussion to a close, I would like you to maybe emphasize on one more thing, specifically on gender-based violence. When it comes to gender-based violence, how deep has it been looking at Kibera as a community?
Gender-based violence is real. It is real, and when I talk about gender-based violence, I don't want only to focus on ladies, on women. The gender-based violence is also on men.
On men.
And you see, one of the things that we are trying to look at, if a man is violent against the lady, a woman, we look at this man, what is the problem with this man? Then you realize that a man turns violence because poverty has been violence to this man. Poverty has damaged the image of this man. So we look at this holistically, so that as we mitigate this violence against gender violence, so that as we help them, we are in a position to help the man that they can also build their image, and again help them to understand that even though they have been affected with poverty and they have lost their image, they can come up.
All right.
So that's the approach we are giving it.
So, Reverend, what will be your call to Kenyans just in a minute? Your call to Kenyans.
Because when we look at it,
hello, Reverend. What would be your call to Kenyans?
In handling this issue, my call to Kenya is that we could come on and think about our neighbors. Even as we might be privileged, let us think about the neighbor. I call upon Kenyans to hold hands together so that we can work in a structured way, so that we can be able to help and not duplicate our work. So let us team up together, know who is where and what is it doing there, so that we can mobilize ourselves in a way that we don't duplicate the intervention.
All right. Thank you very much, Reverend, for finding time to air your opinion and your view on what you're doing. And I wish you the best. Keep up that good work.
Having me on.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day. That is Reverend Matthew Okeo, the Executive Director for the African Inland Child and Community Agency for Development, ICAD, giving us his take on what they are doing, reaching out to the different communities in Kibera. And Jane, I love what the Reverend said, because we were talking about gender-based violence, how it has increased because of the COVID-19 pandemic. They have been able to do two things. One, they have been able to remove the victims and, give them guidance, counseling, train them to, give them that education. But two, they've also tried to find out or investigate why do we have this violence taking place in their respective homes, to find out the reason. Could it be poverty? Could it be other reasons that have instigated or made it, to be that prominent in their respective houses?
Yeah, I think that is a very important areas to start from, because, some of the reasons that were being given by some of these ladies who are, and young girls, and even our young boys who are in such situations, for some of them is because they do not have the necessary resources that they may need. Something as basic as food, as shelter, sanitary transactions have also been a reason as to why some young girls have had to stay in situations that are uncomfortable and are violating their rights. And also another key area that came to light is that, some of these younger boys and girls do not know what constitutes of a sexual offense. They might think that this is the way this caregiver shows me love, this is their love language, but ultimately it is actually violating their rights. And some of them do not know that that is the situation. So they end up staying in situations that they do not understand, thinking it's love, but actually, it is actually in violation of their rights. So more of this needs to be done, especially in marginalized areas where awareness is a very, very big problem.
And this is why we need community education, awareness being provided to different people. The executive director for ICAD said that the one challenge that they are facing when they're dealing with these communities is that they realized that information is not there. People lack information. People don't know what to do, why they are to do it, how to do it, when, how. And this calls to all of us as Kenyans. The awareness needs to be there. And as we talk about awareness, COVID-19, we have been so much concentrating on the face masks, the hand sanitizers, but do we really know even how to use them? These hand sanitizers, these face masks, do we know how to use them? Should we be recycling them? When you use a face mask today, should you use it again the next day and the day after? These are things that people really do not know.
All right, so even before we go to the issue of face masks, which will be coming to that just a little bit later, just to give you some of these statistics in terms of the gender-based violence, and just like the Reverend said, it's not just among women and girls, although they're the most prevalent, but it cuts across both genders. So 90 countries in lockdown, 4 billion people are now sheltering at home from the global contagion of COVID-19, which is a protective measure, staying at home. But then just staying at home brings another deadly danger as opposed to it being a safety measure. Look at this. Earlier on we talked about some perpetrators justifying their reasons of inflicting any kind of any kind of this gender-based violence to these victims. They justify their reasons. But even at that, even before this COVID-19 existed, take note that domestic violence was already one of the greatest human rights violations. In the previous 12 months only, about 243 million women and girls aged between 15 to 49 across the world have been subjected to sexual or physical violence by an intimate partner. This is also what Jen said earlier on. This is, also by people that are supposed to be closer to you, by people that you're supposed to trust more, and yet these are the persons that are inflicting this kind of violence. And just like I mentioned earlier, yes, of course, these figures show us the women and girls, but it cuts across both genders. But of course, just reading through the entire article, it shows how best we can help protect ourselves in these times of this COVID-19 pandemic, and how necessary and important it is for us to continue taking care of each other, even as we are staying at home during the wake of this pandemic. Now, to an issue that Trump has just talked about earlier, this is in regards to these face masks. Remember, they are one of the protective equipment that we can use as of now as you're trying to battle this issue of coronavirus. But the Industrial and Trade Cabinet Secretary Betty Maina had announced that the government had made 1 million masks, which she said that will be distributed to the general public. Remember, the general public is still grappling with the issue of what to purchase. Would it be a face mask, a sanitizer, or food? Time and again, even during this show, we've talked about how difficult it is for Kenyans to even get basic food in this difficult time. And yes, the government, the national government, the county government is doing their best to see how Kenyans can be protected. But even at that, there are some Kenyans who cannot even afford this face mask. And that's why a number of them are resorting to recycling these face masks. Of course, this is that time where I just want to bring in my colleagues to tell us what they think about this issue of recycling face masks, just from their own personal perspective. How safe would this be for a Kenyan to recycle a face mask of whatever kind it is?
And that was what I was even wondering. Once you use a face mask today, should you use it again tomorrow and the next day? Hadi ichafuke ndo useme sasa hii ni sawa, I will no longer use it. Should you wash it again? Should you continue using it after you've washed it? Because these are the do's and the don'ts of these face masks. Don't know, Jen, what you think about it. Because I was seeing, by the way, some people even share face masks, by the way. I've seen it happening on the ground when people say, I don't have a face mask, unaweza chukua yangu. So you share face masks. Is it advisable to share face masks?
I think we should just take a step back and try to see even where it came from. This directive from the World Health Organization. Initially, the World Health had, required only those who are in direct contact with the affected persons to put on masks. Then it reviewed this guideline and said, everyone should put on masks if they're in public places. Mm-hmm. Bringing it home, the Ministry of Health also adopted these new measures, saying whoever is going to be in any public space needs to put on a face mask. And they actually put some consequences to it. If you do not conform to these guidelines, this is what will happen. And there was a grace period until last week when, the consequences came into effect. Number one, fine you 20K or 6-month jail term. All right, or both. Now, so many Kenyans have complained about, some of these face masks being a bit too expensive or not being, readily available to them. And so many options have been coming around. Mm-hmm. And now the most recent phenomenon is this whole aspect of recycling disposable face masks. There are disposable ones and there are reusable ones, right? Mm-hmm. Now, on your screen is an example of a disposable face mask. Now, there has been pictures and videos circulating on social media of some people in some areas actually collecting some of these face masks that have been disposed of and washing them and then repackaging them and going to sell them again out on the streets. And this is in direct violation of all health standards in whatever capacity, and it is putting so many Kenyans at risk. So what advisory is being put right now? When you are disposing those disposable face masks, you are requested to tear it or just cut it as it is on your screen so that it is not collected, washed,
and reused,
repackaged, and sold to another Kenyan out there.
I know.
By the way,
Jane, just as you say,
has told me something there. But there's wengine wakishaosha wanapiga pasi.
You know,
inarudi laini.
Hizo laini unajua is interesting. Kenyans.
But
Unapiga pasi face mask because unajua I've just washed it and then after it gets that heat. Kenyans believe that heat removes dust or kills germs.
And it's interesting how just Jen has mentioned it, that for the disposable ones, before you dispose them, cut them, at least ujue ilikuwa imetumika. But Wakenya ni wale. There's some who might even get them, stitch it back, wash it, piga pasi, and because we as Kenyans, we are vulnerable, we do not have that enough money, just because the way we are saying that some people grapple with the issue of should I buy this or buy that. Mtu anasema now because imeoshwa, imestitchiwa, I will just get it. But again, that also trickles down to the health hazards of reusing these disposable face masks.
And that's why we advise that once you find a face mask that has been already used, don't use it again. And once you have used a face mask and you have to dispose of it, make sure that you cut it, tear it, so that it cannot be used again. And one more thing, don't share face masks.
Even with your children, because you might think, since nimi nimetumia na niko sawa, I'm going to give it to my child. And if you are using the reusable ones, make sure you wash them at least every day before you get to put them on. Get back home at night, wash it, hang it nicely, use it again tomorrow.
And also there is one more thing, Jen, before you close. Once you've used a face mask, you know there is the side that covers your face, and there's the outer side. Some people don't know when to use it, because at some point you get to expose that inner part on the towards outside environment.
All right, and of course that also just talks about the proper training of wearing this face mask. But of course this is where we wrap the show. We do this every other day from Monday through Thursday. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Good Morning Kenya. From me and on behalf of the entire team that made this show a success, we say thank you so much for watching. Till tomorrow, my name is Dorina Range. Good morning.
And on my end, let me finalize by saying, may God bless you and may God bless the work of your hands. My name is Ram Aguko.
And I am Jane Omboy. Be sure to join us again tomorrow morning. Have a lovely day. God bless. We're out.